Okay, well, let's get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Sadie May, and I am the Wellness Coordinator for Salt Lake County's Employee Wellness Program, known as Healthy Lifestyles. And we partner with St. Mark's Hospital on providing these workshops for you to talk to somebody who is working directly with the topics that we are presenting on so that you can ask and questions and know that you are getting answers from somebody who would be an expert in that field. So I will introduce Hannah Van Alstine. She's with St. Mark's Hospital in the Behavioral Health Department. She is a clinical social worker. And before we have Hannah begin, I want to remind you, in order to receive points for attending today, please sign in using the link in the chat box. If you do not have a chat box, if you've logged in on your phone or it's not showing up for you today, you can email us at myhealthylifestyles@slco.org and we will forward you the link. But I will share that throughout the presentation for those who join us a little bit later. And I will turn the time over to you, Hannah.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So like Sadie said, I am a clinical social worker at St. Mark's Hospital in the Behavioral Health Unit. And I am talking today a little bit about mindfulness in everyday life. And I think what a relevant topic to talk about in today's world where we have so many things going on, and it's hard to carve out some time for ourselves and to be present in the moment. We have so much extra stuff going on, not only in our own lives, but also in the current state of the world. So I'm going to dive right in. So I am going to start off by taking a minute, if everyone is all right to do this, but to taking a minute to start this mindfulness workshop by talking and doing a mindfulness practice. So if everyone has a moment, and if you're able to, if you're not, of course, that's totally fine, but to take a minute to do this with me. So it's a 3-minute guided meditation using our breathing. So I'm going to ask that you take a pause from whatever you're doing if you're able to, again, if you're not, okay. But to start by taking a deep breath and place your feet flat on the floor. And really feel your feet on the floor and in contact with the ground underneath you. And now place your hands on your stomach and take deep breaths. Noticing your stomach rising and falling with each in and out breath. And when you feel comfortable to do so, please close your eyes. As you keep breathing deeply into your stomach, I'd like you to breathe in for a count of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then hold for 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And breathe out slowly for a count of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathing 5, hold for 5, and out for 5. And I'm going to give you a minute to do that. right, great, thank you. And I'd like you to now slowly bring your attention to the room and noticing the sounds around you and begin to open your eyes. So that was a very quick example, but I just want to stress throughout this presentation that that's how easy mindfulness is. It's very, I feel like in today's world, it's a very big buzzword. And I want to make sure in this presentation that I'm relaying to you that mindfulness is as easy as breathing. And I want it to be undaunting and chore. So it's simply breathing. And that's the first step of mindfulness. So I hope that has helped some of you and that you found that a good way to, noon, but a good way to start your afternoon. So the next part I'd like to do is just talk about kind of again how easy mindfulness is, and I really liked it, and it really resonated with me. So I hope it does to you as well. So mindfulness is simply being aware of what is happening right now without wishing it were different, enjoying the present without holding on when it changes, which it eventually will, and being with the unpleasant without fearing it will always be this way, which it won't. So I think that resonates with me so much, especially with today's world, is mindfulness is just being aware of what is in front of us and what's going on inside of us. So enjoying the good when it's good and being and sitting in the bad when it's bad, and not focusing on when is this going to end, or I hope this doesn't end, because of course, good ones can't last forever, which we of course wish they would. But in our world, it's important to be, especially today, to be happy when you're in a good moment and to be there and to sit in the bad. And I know that's kind of a weird thing and weird suggestion, but if you truly sit in the bad and soak it in, it helps you to not only to get over that bad thing instead of ruminating on when will this end, but it helps you just to get over it and move on. And of course, I'm not meaning getting over it as in it's going to go away, and I'm not asking anyone to get over it. I should say a better word, but it's helpful to move on from a situation instead of dwelling in it, if that makes sense. But I really liked this quote because I felt like it was really relevant. So the goal of mindfulness practice is to reduce our suffering and increase our happiness. So in our world, it's hard to stay present. I'm going to say that over and over again, so I apologize. But it helps to increase control of our mind by focusing our attention and able to detach from thoughts, images, and sensations that are not in our present moment. So, it helps us also to decrease our reactivity to mental events. And what I mean by that is when we have a bad thought, an anxious thought, a sad thought, even a happy thought, it helps us to remain in the moment and to fully process what's going on instead of just letting our mind and our thoughts be swayed by one thought. So it helps us to stay in our present about rationally, is this going to affect me 5 minutes from now, right? So it's a good way to stay centered. And it helps us to just experience reality as it is and be present not only in our own life, but also be present with others in our lives. So, and we all see, we see those families, and sometimes we're those families, right? That at dinner, we're just all on our phones, and it helps us to be in the moment and mindful so that we can really connect with others and connect with how we're feeling. So, of course, no judgment, but it just helps us to feel better and to feel more connected to people when we are not in another place. And it's not only our phones. I love this graphic because it shows, the man and his dog, and the dog, and they're in the same place, right? So the dog is seeing what's in front of him. He's seeing the trees and the sun. And the man has so many other things on his plate and so many things that he's thinking about that he's not truly enjoying sitting here with his dog in this forest. So and I think all of us have had moments like this or have moments like this all the time. So it's being able to be present and fully in what's going on so that we can enjoy our lives and live our lives instead of thinking about everything else that's going on in our world, which is so hard to do, right? Especially today. I wanted to talk about, because I think it's important to know a bit about statistics and what's going on in our country as far as mindfulness goes. And there is a correlation between unhappiness and mind wandering. So studies have shown that people are substantially less happy when their minds are wandering than when they are present. And not only is unhappiness and mindlessness correlated, mind wandering actually causes unhappiness. So it's not just that the two are in correlation with each other, it's the fact that one causes the other. And an example I like to use when I'm talking about mindlessness and mindfulness is traffic, because most of us, unless you work from home because of the pandemic or in general, most of us at some point in our lives have been commuters, right? We commute to work. So many people do not like their commute to work, understandably, right? And kind of dread it. And I think it's interesting to note, and I like this example that they used in this study, but it's interesting to note that the people who were focused on the traffic, like car in front of me, green light, just in the moment, they're driving their car, they're not on their phones, they're not thinking about anything else, were happier than those who were focusing on other things. And I don't mean just that anxiety, like I'm going to be late to work, I'm going to get in trouble with my boss. I'm talking more also with, I'm so excited I get to go to dinner with my night, or I get to just hang out and just be by myself for the night. Maybe I have the house to myself. It's the good things that people are thinking about other than traffic that makes them unhappier. And so people who are sitting in traffic, this sounds really weird, but people who are sitting in traffic and just being there are more happy than people who are thinking about things they're excited to do when they're home. Studies show. And I think that's really interesting to think about because, as I said, as I have here, it's 4% of a person's life is thinking about something other than what's going on in their lives. So if you think about that statistic and that mindlessness and mind wandering are correlated causes unhappiness, it makes you wonder kind of how are we, when we are constantly thinking about other things and 40% of our lives are thinking about other things. It makes you wonder about it kind of. And kind of for me, it was a little bit of a jarring statistic. So I just thought I would do that. So why is it so hard for us to be mindful and in the present? Because of course as I said, it's easy as breathing, but why is it so hard? And it is hard because despite the increase in the connectivity in our world, so we're able to call, a text, shoot someone a DM or whatever in their Facebook, Instagram, social media profiles. Despite this, we are unhappier than we were 10 years ago when this technology was just starting. So we live in an increasingly fast-paced world, right? We have a constant supercomputer as our companion, and we're able to look anything up, talk down when we want. It's so easy for us to gain access to information and to people. Despite that, we are increasingly shown to be unhappier. And I thought this was interesting too. On average, Americans check their phones 96 times a day. So if you think about that, 96 times a day that someone is checking their phone and trying to be connected to other people or information, and we're still not feeling that connectivity. And the average US adult spends 2 hours and 12 minutes on social media alone. So that does not account for, the time that you're looking on Google or talking to a friend or texting. It's just on that social media piece. So it's 2 hours and 12 minutes of our days are spent on social media. So we should feel more connected to people, right? So I don't know how many of you have seen this documentary, but on Netflix, a couple months ago, they came out with this documentary called The Social Dilemma. And this documentary talks about how the technology has changed the chemistry of our brains. And so I thought this was really interesting because, of course, like social media doesn't actually make you happier. But the documentary goes into detail about what social media does to the chemistry in our brains. And they interview scientists as well as the people that create social media, like Twitter and Facebook and things like that, and tells us what social media is doing to not only adults, but especially young people. And how social media has made us feel less connected and more lonely than we ever have, which is kind of not the point of social media, right? It's to connect us and to be able to keep updated on each other's lives. So because of this, people are noticing, and the creators of these social media platforms are saying, we initially thought this would be a good thing, but now we are noticing that it's turned into an unhealthy tool for people. And it just talks a lot about how it's gotten us more anxiety because, of course, and I know many, if not most of you have heard this, but comparing ourselves to people all the time is exhausting and it makes you feel less than. And so, you could be seeing the moms who are doing a ton of activities with their kids and you're feeling, oh my gosh, I'm time. And it's not realistic, right? Because it's a highlight reel of people's lives. So it's hard for us to stay present with our families and with ourselves, even when we're constantly being inundated with people's highlight reels. And you're thinking to yourself, wow, my life isn't like this, right? So it's hard for us to be present when we're constantly being flashed people's images of the great times that they're having. So I thought that was just a really interesting documentary, and I encourage you to check it out if you haven't. And it's just an interesting thing to think about when this tool was developed to help us when it's kind of doing the opposite. So, and of course, I'm not saying cancel all social media. It's just something to consider and something to look into. And then I just want to talk a little bit about side effects from too much technology. And this doesn't just about social media, it's just technology in general. So according to a 2017 study, people who use social media were 3 times more likely to feel socially isolated, which again, I know we've discussed this, but it's interesting to note that a tool that was used to or created to help us connect with others from a distance has made us feel more socially isolated. And it causes a shorter attention span, a correlation of increased anxiety, as well as decreased physical activity. So again, it's fine in moderation, but studies have shown that social media has become harmful to mental health. So again, something to keep in mind about and kind of correlated with mindfulness, I thought. So now I wanted to kind of get into mindfulness and how to use it and what it is. So I wanted to start off with talking about wise mind. So, and I loved this quote concerning wise mind. So wise mind is the integration of opposites. So your emotion mind and your reasonable mind. And you cannot overcome emotion mind with reasonable mind, nor can you emotions with reasonableness. You must go within and bring the two together. And so this idea of wise mind, talking about emotion and reasonable mind coming together to help us make decisions that are, intuitive, free of conflict, and also helps us solve problems in a healthy and mindful way. So everyone has access to a wise mind. All of And it's not the goal, again, I don't want to say to be in wise mind all the time. It's just doing so when you're making decisions or as much as you can, of course, to be in this mindset so that you can make decisions wisely and you feel more calm and balanced and peaceful so that you can make good decisions, but also feel good about the decisions you make. So it just helps us kind of bring that calm, reasonable mind and emotion mind together so that we can feel more balanced in ourselves. So I like to use the example of, I like to use this graphic when talking about emotional, rational, and wise mind. So I'm going to use the traffic example again, but in a different sense, because I think most of us deal with traffic, right? So I just want to kind of touch on a few pieces of this. So with the rational mind, that's where our decisions are based on what makes intellectual sense, right? What's common sense here? and thinking logically and focusing on the facts. And then comparing our current experiences to past experiences. And then suppressing or ignoring our emotions. So, a rational mind sounds great. However, you're not in tune with that emotional side of things. And most of the time, we lean either way or the other. Maybe we're someone who operates mostly in rational mind and we'll need to bring that emotional piece into it to be in our wise mind. Or opposite side, maybe we operate in an emotional mindset and we need to bring that rational piece in. So someone who operates more on an emotional level, decisions are based on what feels good. So when you're thinking about things and you're, thinking, what would I like to do? You're not really thinking about what would be, what would make the most sense, which would be more of the rational side. But what would I like to do? Which is not a bad, right? And thinking and focusing on your emotions solely when making decisions. So, if, for example, if a friend doesn't call you back, someone who might be an emotional mind might think, oh my gosh, this person is mad at me. And so if you were to take that rational mind into it and bring your wise mind together, you might think, hey, maybe they're busy and I'm having this anxiety about they're busy. It's kind of bringing that common sense, that emotion sense, and putting it together. And then kind of like I kind of described, reactive or defensive. So if someone does something, instead of us bringing that rational side of things, some of us who lean into our emotion mind more might go, wow, they must not like me, or whatever it may be. We're kind of reactive to external stimuli, what people do, people's actions and their words. And it often is opposed to rational thinking, right? So when we're in our emotion mind, we're not thinking about what's logical here. We're thinking about what our internal stimuli, our judgments are automatically saying. We're thinking about our emotions. We're not bringing in that rational piece. So what is wise mind? It's bringing in a balance between the two. It's living mindfully, bringing in that present moment, which we've been talking about. And it's honoring and nurturing our emotional mind, but also thinking about rational decisions. So again, I'm with the traffic example. When someone cuts us off in traffic, our emotional mind would go to, what a jerk, oh my gosh, they're doing this because they're just the worst. And our rational sense would say, if we were operating just in rational mind, it'd say, someone cut me off. No emotion saw whatever involved in that. So when you're in wise mind, a wise mind person might say, that person cut me off and it's making me feel this way, but maybe they are late for work, or maybe they're having a baby, or maybe they are just having a bad day. So it's bringing that, I see this is what's happening. It's making me feel this way, but maybe there's some logical explanation as to why that's happening. So I hope that kind of helps explain what a wise mind is. I have examples because I think it's the most relatable. So I thought this was interesting. So 10 things that mindful people do differently. And I'm going to touch on a couple of these and internal judgments seriously. So when we're thinking about ourselves, a lot of us maybe are not as nice to ourselves as we should be. And how I always explain this is, think of yourself, how would you talk to a friend? Would you talk to your friend the way that you talk to yourself? And that usually hits home with my clients. And I think that's a relatable example too, because we don't think of ourselves as, a friend or whatever, but we are. And it's hard sometimes to see that. So I always say, talk to yourself like you talk to a friend. Or would you talk to your friend the way you're talking to yourself? And that can kind of help put things into perspective. Two, they don't try to deny or avoid their emotions. Kind of going back to what I was talking about before, but in that sense of, maybe sitting in that sense of, if it's grief, anger, irritability, sadness, being not trying to avoid it, not trying to make yourself feel better. I'm not saying, like, of course, just sit in it forever, but generally when you sit in your emotions, it helps you to let go. instead of distracting yourself, like recognize like, wow, I'm really feeling sad. And that's okay. I don't have to make myself feel better if I don't want to. It's okay if I want to feel sad. And sad is not a bad emotion. All of us have sadness. So sitting in that sadness and really recognizing that can help you heal a lot quicker than if you were to just be like, I'm just going to be happy right now because I just can't be sad, right? So, and of course, there are times when we have to do that, but for the most part, it's more helpful to sit in that sadness. Mindful people do one thing at a time. And so, for example, when you're talking to someone, you talk to them, you relay your information instead of talking to them, texting on your phone, and then hearing what the next person is doing in the other room. So when you're talking to someone, it's just talking to them instead of having those external pieces. And then 4 is they use everyday tasks like cleaning, dishes, laundry, and turn them into a mindfulness practice, which is again that message I want to keep conveying is that mindfulness can be done anywhere, anytime, with anything. So I do talk about this later about doing dishes mindfully, and it's kind of something I would, people I don't think ever think about mindfulness is doing the dishes. So I love that. So they're curious. They spend time in nature. So as much time as mindful, they try to get out in nature because there aren't so many distractions in nature as there might be in the city. They're fully present and listening without controlling or judging others. So, and that includes ourselves. So kind of like I was speaking and talking about, if someone is expressing to them that they are angry with, so if someone is angry with me, and if I'm a mindful person, I would say, this person is angry with me, instead of saying, no, I didn't do that. That's not the case. It's hearing someone out and listening and validating, like, hey, I understand you're feeling this way. And maybe you had no idea. So I understand you're feeling this way. And I had no idea that that was the case. Let me tell you my side of things. And, and I'm sorry that this is the way you're feeling. So it's validating, recognizing that person's emotions, and then explaining, this is kind of where I was at. So it seems like there's miscommunication, right? Instead of just kind of writing them off right away. They challenge existing beliefs. I'm going to talk about this more too, but I think that's an important thing to do. We all have internal narratives in our heads, and we live by them, right? We have these internal thoughts and stories about who we are in our heads, and they're called core beliefs. And some of them are not very healthy, unfortunately, and we'll talk more about that. But they turn off distractions, TV, phone, and enjoy every bite of food. So mindfully eating is a big part of mindfulness too. And again, I'll touch on that later. And then lastly, they take care of their body. So people who are mindful are, if I'm hungry and I'm thinking about it, hey, I'm hungry, instead of saying, oh, I gotta finish this or whatever. It's taking that second to say, hey, yeah, I'm hungry, I need to eat something. And many of us, we notice we're hungry, or maybe some of us don't even notice we're hungry. We're so busy that we're not in tune with what's going on inside of our bodies. So that's just some things that people who are mindful might do differently than people who maybe don't practice mindfulness as often. So taking a non-judgmental stance is another tool that mindfulness practice, I guess, has. And if you've ever heard of DBT, it's called dialectical behavior. But they have this tool called taking a non-judgmental stance. And for me, of course, you're like, okay, that makes sense. But if you think about it, all of us have internal assumptions. That's what our brain does. If we see something, our brain automatically assigns a judgment to that. So it's practicing and saying, well, I'm seeing this, and this is what I'm seeing. So it's not assigning a judgment. So an example I like to use is a couch. So, someone who maybe is practicing mindfulness might say, okay, so I see this couch. It's green. It's got some flowers on it, right? We automatically make judgments. We're like, oh my gosh, that is the most hideous couch I've ever seen. So that's kind of taking that judgment piece out of it. So green couch, got some flowers on it, or that is the ugliest thing I've ever seen. So it's kind of, you obviously you can see the difference, but it's taking that judgment outside of a non-judgmental approach to take away that judgment from whatever we're seeing or interacting with. So it helps us to perceive the world in a different way and helps us to take our judgments out of the mix. So an example is, we kind of talked about this. On your way home from work, a car cuts you off on the road and you say, I can't believe they did that. So the mindfulness approach would be, I noticed that car cut me off and I'm feeling angry about it because I've had a really long day and traffic has been bumper to bumper. So it helps you to be in tune with your emotions. So being mindful is being in tune with what's going on, but also taking that rational piece and saying, I'm seeing this and I'm feeling this way about it. So that non-judgmental stance is trying to take our judgments out of that, because our judgments can automatically make us feel a certain way, us to be less reactive and more in tune with what's going on. So I said I would kind of mention with mindfulness and the dishes. So being mindful is as easy as breathing, but also you can do it with anything. So with example of washing the dishes. So you can focus on what you're doing in the moment, one dish at a time. So studies show that mindfully washing the dishes can actually increase inspiration by 25%. So if you're inspired to do something, that will be increased by 25% if you're simply being mindful while you're washing the dishes. And it helps lower your anxiety by 25%, which is crazy to think about. So if you're simply doing something mindfully, if you're like, okay, first I'm going to put water on. Now I'm going to put the dish under the water. I'm going to adjust the temperature. I'm going to put some soap. I'm just going to scrub it until it's clean, right? So if you're internally thinking about each task that you're doing in a mindful way, and it can increase your inspiration by 25% and also lower your anxiety by 27%. So, and you can do this with, like I said, you can fold laundry mindfully, you can vacuum, you can dust. It can be replicated and with anything, and you can still have those same results. You can still decrease your anxiety and increase your inspiration simply by doing things that we have to do on a daily basis. So that's one easy way of incorporating mindfulness practice into our daily chores and activities. And challenging of this practice for mindfulness, and I love this example because almost everyone has negative self-talk and we all have core beliefs about ourselves. And most of these core beliefs are developed when we are a child. So it's through experiences, it's through maybe, parents, and these are core beliefs are good or so they're not easy to shake, unfortunately, but challenging those beliefs on a daily basis or a narrative of what we think of ourselves. So an example of a core belief would be, I'm a loser. And it can cause us to search for evidence that that is the case. So I use the example, while we're kids, we're failing a test or being left out of things as a kid. So if as a child, you develop this core belief in school, maybe you were bullied, or maybe you were left out a couple times of your friends' activities, or maybe you failed a test, maybe you had a really hard time with math, or whatever it may be. You develop those core beliefs and you stick to those core beliefs, and eventually you believe this and you search for this evidence to be true. So when we have things happen that say the opposite, so maybe you got invited to a party or you a test, many of us assume that's a fluke or it's just plain luck. So it gets to the point with these core beliefs, as you can see, that it can be really hard for us to think positively about ourselves if we have negative core beliefs, and they're developed while we're kids and ingrained in us. So eventually it can lead us to limit ourselves, such as not putting ourselves out there to meet new people. So if as a child you started to believe with your core beliefs, maybe you had a harder time making friends. As an adult, you might carry that with you and think, I'm not worth being a friend. I'm not someone who's interesting, or whatever your core belief is. And that can carry on through adulthood. So using the as if skill to help us challenge those thoughts by acting as if our core beliefs weren't true. So for example, if you think, I'm not interested, or I'm not interesting, or I am not someone who would want, or I'm not someone who someone else would want to be friends with, for example. Acting as if we were someone who would want to be friends with, what would someone who has friends, or is someone who would be an interesting friend, what would they do? What things would they do? What things would, and acting as if that were the case. So the more that you do this, it can improve our self-image and make us more present instead of worrying that we're not good enough. So it's important to do this because, like I said, it starts in childhood, but it can be carried on through our adult lives. And that is really hard to break. But if we're conscious of these and we're aware of these core beliefs, we can start to challenge them and saying, I'm going to act as if that wasn't true and see what happens. So I think that's a really important one because all of us have core beliefs, positive or negative, and it's really hard to challenge these if you're not aware of them. So I think it's important to just bring awareness of these and start to kind of think about and be mindful of what those core beliefs are, and acting as if they're negative, acting as if they aren't true. So I really like that skill a lot. And then I kind of touched on this as well, but turning off distractions and enjoying our food. It seems so simple and so obvious, and it's so much easier said than done. And I'd like to say that because it's not easy. It really is not easy, but I like to think of mindfulness as a muscle. And every time that you work on it, it gets easier and easier as time goes on. So this is kind of just a rhetorical question, but do you ever just sit down to watch a show, and after a while, after watching it, you reach for more chips and realize you ate the entire bag? Like, I know a lot of us, this has happened to a lot of us, or whatever it may be. And you're like, wow, how the heck did this happen? So intuitive eating can help us to enjoy our food and be mindful when our bodies are full. So turning off distractions, phones, TVs, computers, whatever it may be, and thinking about the taste, the texture, the smell, the color of our food. And look for signs that you're full. So if you've got that tight feeling in your stomach, or you no longer have any of those hunger pangs. So when we're simply in tune with these things, we don't have the TV going, we don't able to signal, hey, you're not hungry anymore, you can stop, or whatever it may be. So I think it's important for us because when you're distracted, you miss those signals. And you can eat a whole bag of chips without even realizing that you're not full anymore. So it's important to be in tune with our body and be mindful about, are we full? Are we hungry still? How much more food do I need? So that you can feel full and really enjoy our food. So it may seem simple, but just being present while we eat can help us maintain a healthy weight and enjoy our meals much more. So not only can help us enjoy food more, but also maintaining a healthy weight plays a huge role in mindful eating and intuitive eating. And then I wanted to touch on flow state as well. So flow state is a term coined by positive psychologists, and positive psychologists actually study happiness and what does it take for someone to be happy. Flow state is a term to describe a feeling when people are fully present and fully involved in enjoying what they're doing. So it's usually something that we love or we're passionate about, and we get lost in the moment. So flow state could be knitting, it could be drawing, it could be working out, it could be going on walks, whatever you do. And many times, I would say most of the time, it's our hobbies that we enjoy. If it's fishing, if it's camping, achieving that flow state is kind of the key. Actually. So the more that we're in this flow state, the more the benefits are we're happier, we have a sense of concentration, we have a sense of simplicity, and we're calm. And we're also being mindful because we're lost in the exercise. We're lost in the activity. And it helps us to become a happier, more present, balanced person. So it's usually something that you're passionate about. or something that you just enjoy to do. And that flow state can help us to become happier. And the positive psychologists in the world think it is the key to happiness. I thought that was really interesting. And how do we create this? So I talked about it. So you need to care about the activity and the task or whatever you're doing that would get you to that flow state. And your mindset should not be on goal focused, but simply on the task. So the example I used was, wow, this is a beautiful hike. The flowers are great. The waterfall is beautiful. Versus, I'm going to hike 5 miles. So you can kind of see the difference in the attitude towards the activity. So you're not saying, I'm going to knit 50 sweaters this weekend. You're saying, I really love this pattern, or I love this color that I'm knitting with. I love the color. I love the feel of it. Instead of, I'm going to finish this by the end of the weekend. So it's doing something that you also feel good at. So if you're in an activity, it's much easier to be in a flow state. And it helps take us off the mind of the mechanics of it. So if you're learning something, learning a new hobby or a new skill set, it's a little bit harder to be in that flow state because you're kind of like thinking about the process or how do I do this versus just enjoying doing it. And it's not about, I love this, it's not about the journey, or it's about the journey. I'm sorry. It's about the journey. It's not about the destination. So it's being in that enjoyment of whatever you're doing. I used the hike as the example. Seeing what's out there, the wildlife, the vegetation, being there with your friends and just enjoying the hike or your family instead of thinking, we've got to get to 5 miles. I got to get it done. And it helps us to be present in the moment if we don't have that goal in mind. And I don't know if any of you, I did a presentation a couple ago. I also talked about this in another presentation I did, but I think it goes hand in hand with mindfulness. But it's a Danish term, and it's called Hygge. So it's a Danish term, basically that translates to a feeling of enjoying the simple things in life and being cozy. And the Danish are consistently ranked one of the happiest countries in the world, and they attribute much of their happiness to Hygge, or that mindset of feeling cozy and enjoying the simple things. So changing to be more, Hygge friendly, it can help us to be more present and in the moment, and just feeling connected to others. So the author of this book, his name is Mikkel, and he talks about what is the Hugo Manifesto? How do we get to Hygge? And I'm only going to touch on a couple of these, but you need a good atmosphere. He talks about how you need soft lighting and candles and things that make you feel like the lighting feel cozy. Fireplaces if you've got one. Of course, the big one that I've been hammering this home, presence, making sure that you're off of your phones and just enjoying where you're at. Being comfortable. So getting on those after work sweatpants and just sitting in comfortable clothes can help you to feel more cozy, more present, more comfortable. And you're not thinking about, wow, these jeans are super uncomfortable. So it takes your mind off of that and onto just being. And it's enjoying pleasurable food. So enjoying that, maybe it's a really good recipe that you made and making that recipe with your family, or just you bought yourself a treat from the grocery store, a cookie or whatever it may be, and just really enjoying the taste and the smell and just being present with that. And also togetherness is a big part of it. So building relationships and doing activities that bring you together. And whatever that may be, maybe it's just sitting around and talking with your friends and family. Maybe it's playing board games. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's watching a movie together. And, I think this is so relevant for what we're going through now because we can't do as many of the things that we used to do. So just learning how to make our home a great place to be and a place we want to be is important. And then, of course, I'm going to bring it to COVID because I'm sure we've all had enough of it, but I think it's important to note that anxiety and depression statistics throughout COVID have shown that, and on average, and I got this information and this data from May and July of this last year. So polls were taken, and on average, 40% of US adults were experiencing anxiety or depression. And the mental health piece of COVID and what that's brought to our world and ourselves and our families, it showed a lot of it is caused by that social isolation, losing loved ones to COVID, fear of getting COVID, financial issues, losing shelters, and other issues related to what has COVID brought to our world. So how do we cope with an ever-changing world when many things are just not the same, and there's not a sense of safety a lot of the time because of this pandemic? So a little more skill I thought I'd throw in here. How to remain mindful during the pandemic. So things that can help us. So practicing that mindful activities that we talked about, the dishes, challenging those core beliefs, acting as if that weren't the case, non-judgmental stance, all of the things we've talked about. Meditation can also help. So there's a lot of guided meditation apps if you're a beginner to meditation. I really like Insight Timer. It helps us to practice meditation if we're new at it. And when your mind is wandering and it's hard to start meditation, it feels, but it really is easy if you've got that guided meditation to help you along and kind of keep your focus. And limiting our phone and social media usage by putting timers on our phones. Many of our smartphones these days have timers. So giving yourself that 1 hour timer to use Facebook, and the phone shuts it off after an hour, whatever it may be, just so that you can practice kind of mindfully tuning out the social media. And then I have a quick grounding exercise that you can practice as well when you have thoughts. So if a lot of us have anxiety due to the pandemic, or just are anxious individuals in general. But practicing grounding can be, it's called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 skill. So 5 things that you can see right now, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. So that can help us bring ourselves back to the present when our anxiety thoughts are racing and we have ruminating thoughts, bring ourselves back to mindfulness and practice that presentness. And I think that's just an easy way to do it as well. That makes mindfulness seem a little less daunting. And there's my sources. And then I am done. So does anyone have any questions at all?
While we're waiting for questions, thank you so much, Hannah. That was wonderful. We actually have a YouTube channel for our participants to use, and on there we have our Mindful Monday meditation. So for those of you who need some extra help in learning to practice mindfulness in your life and to try different ways of practicing mindfulness, you can actually go to our YouTube channel, and I put it here in the chat box. All right, we have a question about where could I get a copy of the Hygge Manifesto?
Yeah, so you can get the copy if you want to read the book. I got mine on Amazon, but it's just called Hygge and the Secret to Danish Happiness. You can also just Google, sorry. You can Google the Hygge Manifesto, and it just pops up on Google as well if you just want to look at what that is. But it's found on Google, or if you want the book, it's on Amazon as well.
And it looks like somebody else said you can check it out from our county library.
Oh, awesome, great.
The next question we have is any extra resources for encouraging kids in mindfulness?
I think a big one for kids is coloring. I think coloring, drawing, you can use it as adults or kids for mindfulness. Another one, a fun thing that I have people do with their families is yoga for kids. And if you go on YouTube, or if you go on YouTube, I think that's the easiest thing you can do. And do yoga for kids. There's a lot of different yoga for kids activities that makes it more fun for kids and easier to do, so it's a little bit easier for them to understand. And I think just encouraging that family together time, kind of like those activities that I was talking about, going on hikes and board games and watching a movie mindfully, having the phones put in a box or whatever you do and really tune in with that. But there's a lot of different activities. Also, Pinterest. Pinterest is a great way to find mindfulness activities for kids and just a bunch of different fun crafts and things to do. But there's so many resources out there, luckily. And I'm talking about the whole time, you know, don't go on the internet, you know, tune in. But I think the internet can be a very useful tool to achieve mindfulness. It's just doing it mindfully, right? But I hope that answered your question.
I think I've also seen on YouTube there are Sesame Street mindful exercises they can do. So it's the characters they're
Yeah,
used to seeing.
yeah, and there are you know, apps on your phone too for I don't know the specific names, but I do know that there are apps on your phone for mindfulness practices for kids too. So lots of different things that kids can do for mindfulness.
I think that was our last question. Thank you so much, Hannah. And for those of you who didn't sign in, I put it in the chat box for one last chance to sign in or to email us at myhealthylifestyles@slco.org to sign in. But thank you so much for being with us today. It was extremely impactful, especially right now.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.